as you can see, I've got the wiring harness. I'm moving on to some considerably different work to anything I've done before. This is the original Gilbern wiring harness, and it's been in a box for the last couple of years. So I've laid out the harness kind of on the car. But, yeah, there's some interesting points. So for example, down here we appear to have the wiper motor connections, but as well as that we also have a connection to the left-hand indicators. So I guess the Lucas original wiper motor was down here somewhere and it fed up round from that direction. Of course we now have a Ford Focus based system in there, so that's not quite right. And we've also got what I believe to be an overdrive switch, which I don't need because I've got a 6-speed gearbox. We got the original ignition switch. On this side, on this side of the car, we have the connections that go to the front, obviously the headlights, but also the starter motor. Where's the starter motor? I've lost the starter. Why does that say wipers there? Mystery. Well, that's another element of investigation work that's changing your mind about what things are. Alright, so we have the... Oh, that's right, yeah, that's the starter motor wire, so that would have gone down here somewhere. And then we have the... so the harness is kind of wanting to be like this, but with these plug-in sections that go extending one subloom to another. So the back of the car is connected by a subloom which plugs together with the long wire from the front of the car. I've got the fuse connections, or connections for the fuse box I should say, and here's the voltmeter which I mentioned. Big heavy wire over here somewhere for the ammeter, as everything runs through it. So yeah, you can kind of work out eventually, after a lot of detective work, looking up of colour codes, having some knowledge of the original Essex engine. It's kind of laid out like this. So it looks like there's two portions that run down the engine bay, this one and the one on the far side, and this part is behind the bulkhead. So that's a step in the right direction. Because this wiring harness needs some changes, and because it's so big, I've decided to invest in this large board. I'm going to spread it out, fix it down, and that will stop it from all coming unravelled. So, off camera, I spent some time stripping some more of the plastic covering and putting screws in to fix this thing in place so the whole thing doesn't unravel. So it kind of is laid out mostly as it would be in the car. Right, so I have pulled out the overdrive switch. I pulled out a lot of the ammeter, which I'm not going to use, but some of that great thick stuff is required to go off to the fuse box, so I haven't quite decided how to do that, so I'm just going to leave that hanging for a moment. What else don't I need? Some more of the big fat wiring is over here. In fact, it needs to be associated with the ignition switch, which is here, so yeah, I'm going to have to decide about that. What's another one I don't want? I don't really want a voltmeter particularly, at least not one that goes all the way up to the alternator. And one thing is certain is I won't be using this style of alternated plug either. So I'll take out this, I think it's the orange wire. Yeah, that's going to go. And at that point we might be nearly down to the basics. And then it's just going to be a question of moving things, like the wire promoter doesn't need to be way down here, it needs to come shorter, quite plainly, since it's damaged. And then we can get on with the business of putting it back together again, but we're not quite there yet. So I've been at this quite a long time again, and of course I had to work out how to connect the harness that goes down to the back of the car, which is a long one on its own down there, and joining on via all this business here. And what I have here is a large quantity of different types of colour-coded wire, and it's all what is called thin wall wire. So while it looks thinner than this, in fact it isn't. Not sure how I can demonstrate that, but this is 30. The conductor inside is 32 times 0.2, I think, which I did a lot of maths on to work out. But anyway, yes, it turns out that the conductor thickness of this wire is actually pretty much the same as it is on this one, although the actual conductor, the actual sheathing is quite a bit thinner, so that's good. So what I'm going to do now is I need to lay out extra wires for things like electric fuel pumps and so on, which of course the car never had before. Just as an example, so I've laid out the what I'll call the front to back wire, which you hopefully can see running across to the table outside there. So this is what has become of the front to back cable, as I've called it. As you can see, I've removed the insulation, the binding that is, and I've done that in order to add various different wires, such as fuel pumps, boot release solenoid, and so on, speakers actually as well. And so lots of extra wires, and obviously I've used different colour codes to do that. As well as doing that, and as I've mentioned, I don't like bullet connectors, so I've used this multi-pin plug, which is actually a ATX power supply from a PC, ATX power supply plug, and I've used it because it has 24 connectors on it, and of course I've spliced it into the appropriate colours there, and it means that this side becomes part of the front wiring harness. And in fact, I've already done that elsewhere. This is a spare one, so I've got these trailing ends, as it were, which I can now use to test the connections all the way through to the back of the car. And so with a bit of judicious temporary wiring and connecting the whole thing front to back, bit of an external power supply going on, we have some operational lighting. Obviously there's loads of spare wires that I can't do anything with at the minute, such as fuel pump, but I hope you get my point. So the front to back wiring, moment routed through the window, but yeah, all the wires are there. You can even see some for the speakers through the window there, heated rear window, blah 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 blah. So that means when I connect up the other half of this ATX connector, which is actually on the front wiring harness, we should get the same results. So the front to back cable, okay, it needs binding up and probably some more testing. The front to back cable is pretty much done. Now the front harness is looking much worse. But you can see the mating half of the ATX connector, which goes to the rear cable. So this one, rather than being a mess of bullet connectors, just plug it straight in, and that should be absolutely fine. We've got a lot of extra cores waiting for switches to be attached. A lot of that depends, of course, on the shaping of the dashboard, which right now hasn't got any switches at all, so they will have to be finalised together. Here we have the wipers, which is too long rather, needs to be shortened like that. But it's kind of coming together. Maybe daunting, but there's been little progress at the front as well, which I will demonstrate. And so here we have the front of the car lit up with some, temporary wiring, because the front of the car isn't as complete as the rear, but nevertheless the actual lamps are connected, and so we just need to establish exactly where and how to connect those wires to these wires, and that will be the next step for the wiring. But it's good at least to have the essential wires that go into the actual lamps connected up, which they weren't until recently. So I think, part one of the wiring at this point is complete.